Boker Tov. Boker Tov. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jana J. And I usually come to the 10 o'clock Bible study. And you will see me over at one of the keyboards, and that's where I'm most comfortable. I'm not as comfortable being in this place, but when I speak about Israel, it's a little different. So first, I would like to thank Derek for allowing me to do this today, and for Judy and Bernie, who suggested the idea, and they're not here. And I also want to thank Caleb back in the booth for taking time out this morning and this evening to help. It would not be without him here today. And then lastly, I'd like to thank Bonnie in the office. She compiled the booklets that you have and bound them, so they're really nice. So I want to thank Bonnie for that. And if you didn't get one, there's still some in the basket back there. Help yourself. And as you can tell, I have some notes here, so I don't forget to tell you all these important things. Let's open with a word of prayer, shall we? It is a Bible study. Dear God, we do thank you for this day that you've given us and for the precious gift of life. Lord, I thank you for these folks who have come here today to learn more about your holy land where your Son lived, loved, and taught. May they thirst to learn more about you through these pictures and my words. I pray these things in your holy name. Amen. So I did this presentation 4 years ago, and it was an evening presentation, so many of you may not have been here at that time to hear this. It's a little different. I've added a few things and changed the booklet up a little bit, so if you were here 4 years ago to hear it, it'll be a little bit different to you. As you know, my traveling companions were Vicki Stevenson, who some of you know, and our former pastor, Steve Connor. And even though our luggage didn't all cross the Atlantic Ocean with us, that's not what I focus on when I think about Israel. All is well, and my luggage beat me home. It was a minor event in the grand scheme of things, and we were able to put our insurance money to good use, as after Sabbath was over, Steve hailed down a cab and took us to the Jerusalem Mall. So we got to shop in the largest mall in the Middle East, which I just learned yesterday. It was beautiful with outdoor lighting and 2 floors, just like Glenbrook has 2 floors, so it was very contemporary. They just didn't have a petite department. Go figure. But when I read scripture now, I'm able to draw on the visuals in my mind. I've seen the remains of King Herod's palace at Caesarea Maritima, where Paul was in prison while he awaited his trial in Rome. And I've witnessed the rushing waters of the Jordan in Tel Dan in northern Israel, and then remembered my baptism near Jericho. I've dipped my feet in the salty Dead Sea and in the fresh Sea of Galilee where Jesus walked on the water. And I enjoyed a fish lunch of mush, which is known as St. Peter's fish, that Jesus could have cooked on the shore for breakfast. I've walked the ruins at Caesarea Philippi, where Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do the people say I am? And who do you say I am?" So you get the picture. It's been an amazing journey since 2018. As I was telling someone earlier, it's like I can't get enough to read. I can't study it enough. It's here, and it's here to stay. So we'll get started here. Israel is a sliver of land about the size of New Jersey that bridges Africa and Asia. Its fertile midsection is known as the Jezreel Valley. It was a popular trade route in ancient times, and caravans were vulnerable to robbers, and it became a place of many conflicts and battles. Jesus and his family surely passed this region as they traveled from Nazareth to Jerusalem. and this route was also used in order to avoid Samaria. The Jezreel Valley is below sea level due to a tectonic plate, and there are extinct volcanoes in this area. After the time of Christ, earthquakes, as you can see on the screen, earthquakes devastated Galilee, and our guide Michael, who you will find on page 1 of your booklet, he was just a wealth of information. He had so many facts and information off the top of his head. He was awesome. He told us that Israel can expect to see an earthquake every 100 years, and in 2018, he said they were due to have one any time, and I think they're still waiting. Today, as you know, the United States and Israel declared Jerusalem to be the capital. However, the people of Palestine do not feel that way. Relations between the two are fairly hospitable. However, nearly 2 million Palestinians are denied freedom of movement and must pass through checkpoints, and we did this a few times. They have to pass the checkpoints in order to visit relatives or conduct business beyond the West Bank, or they need to make special arrangements with the government. If a driver is suspected to be Israeli, they may continue on their way. Otherwise, the driver is expected to present the paperwork. Our overnight accommodations in Netanya, Tiberias, and Jerusalem were first class, and each offered an ample buffet with a wide variety of Israeli foods. Very similar to ours, just a little bit of different seasoning flair, but very good. The street traffic was quite busy, and the driver seemed adept at the pace, making quick turns and stops. And we only noted one accident throughout the whole trip, and it was on some desert highway. I'm not sure that they actually have driver's training there. But we weren't afraid, and thankfully at no time did we feel that we were in danger. To describe 7 packed days in about an hour's time is monumental. So to save a little time today and offer you the best of Israel, we'll begin this morning with an awesome video by Rick Steves that highlights much of the culture, the sights and sounds, some cities that we did not visit, which are Haifa, Occul, and Tel Aviv, other than the airport. You can only fly into Tel Aviv. And then we'll proceed with my personal photo package. So Caleb, if you're ready, we'll haba and start the video.
Third of humanity, Israel is literally Holy Land, and Jerusalem marks its sacred center. For Christians, this is where Jesus was crucified and resurrected. For Muslims, this is from where Muhammad journeyed to heaven. And for Jews, this is where the Temple of Solomon stood. The crossroads of 3 great religions, the Holy Land has been coveted and fought over for centuries.
Israel is filled with a fascinating range of sights. Jerusalem, with its dazzling dome, is alive with religious passion. Christian, Muslim, and Jewish. And cosmopolitan Tel Aviv enjoys its in-love-with-life Mediterranean beaches. Visitors ponder the fortress of Masada. Pilgrims are spiritually refreshed at the biblical sites around the Sea of Galilee, and everybody can bob like corks in the super salty Dead Sea, the lowest place on earth. Haifa, with its thriving multicultural cafe scene, shows promise as Israel grapples with ongoing challenges. In the Middle East, Israel faces the Mediterranean Sea, a Jewish state surrounded by Muslim and Arab neighbors. Today, the Holy Land, the region west of the Jordan River, is split between Israel and the Palestinian territories of the West Bank and Gaza. For our visit, we start in Jerusalem, then visit Masada, Tel Aviv, and the Sea of Galilee.
We'll visit the West Bank, also filled with fascinating history and culture, in another episode. And the contentious issues Israelis and Palestinians are grappling with is beyond the scope of this travel show. Instead, we'll simply enjoy and explore Israel.
This country is small, the size of New Jersey, with 8 million people. While the State of Israel was founded just after World War II, the Jewish people have a history here going back 4,000 years. Within a 2-hour drive of Jerusalem, you can take a sweeping tour of sites illustrating its tumultuous back-and-forth past. 2,000 years ago, the ancient city of Caesarea was one of the mightiest seaports on the Mediterranean. It was built by King Herod of biblical fame and named after its patron, the emperor, or Caesar. Imagine this place back then, vessels loaded with spices and exotic goods setting sail for Rome. Further up the coast is the 12th century Crusader town of Occul. Its walls seem to have been weathered as much by history as by the sea.
The Crusades were rampaging armies of European Christians who wrought havoc here. Their goal? To defeat the Muslims and put the Holy Land back in Christian hands.
But Muslim dominance returned, and in the 16th century, the Ottoman Turks surrounded Jerusalem with this mighty wall. And the 20th century has left reminders of the determined Zionist spirit that built today's Jewish state. Pillboxes on the Golan Heights recall Israel's commitment to holding the high ground. Lush valleys farmed by cooperative communities called kibbutzes recall generations of patriotic Israelis who turned the desert into orchards.
In 1947, after the Holocaust and the end of World War II, the United Nations helped found the modern state of Israel, and Jews, long dispersed across the world, returned to their ancient homeland. In the process, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were displaced, and to this day, both peoples struggle to find an equitable and peaceful way to share what each consider their rightful homeland.
This process has been difficult, and both sides have suffered tragically. Around here, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. In the name of defense against suicide bombers, Israel has built what it calls a security fence, and what millions of Palestinians consider a degrading and illegal land grab. And Israel is further asserting itself by building communities for hundreds of thousands of Jewish settlers across the West Bank border, in what Palestinians consider their territory. While there are no easy answers, as a travel writer, I believe traveling here is important. I connect with people whenever and wherever I can. Just meeting people and talking helps build understanding.
Place to live in.
Jerusalem is a sprawling and modern city of about 800,000 people. Exploring its shopping boulevards and malls, an American feels right at home. But its historic core, the Old City, home to around 35,000, feels lost in time. Its venerable walls corral a tangle of vibrant sights. Within a 10-minute walk, you can see the Church of the Holy Sepulcher, so sacred to Christians. The Dome of the Rock, treasured by Muslims. And at Temple Mount, the holiest place in Judaism, the Western Wall. For so many people, Jerusalem is the closest place on earth to heaven. Much of Jerusalem's importance rests upon a very special rock, which lies under this glittering dome. Muslims believe Muhammad journeyed to heaven from this rock, and they've worshipped here for 1,300 years. This glittering shrine, the Dome of the Rock, is one of Jerusalem's enduring landmarks. Intricate geometric designs in stone and tile fit within its pure and simple lines. While today this plaza functions as a massive mosque for Muslims, Jews call this place Temple Mount. It was the site of their ancient temple complex, only the foundation of which survives. It's here that they believe Abraham, as a test of his faith, was asked to sacrifice his son, Isaac. Considering this spot the center of the earth, Jews have worshipped here for 3,000 years.
1,000 years before Christ, King David united the 12 tribes of Israel and captured Jerusalem. His son, Solomon, built the first temple right here. It was later destroyed, and the second temple was built. Then came the catastrophic year for the Jews, 70 AD, when the Romans destroyed their temple and ushered in the diaspora. That's when the Jews became a people without a land and dispersed throughout the world.
Here at that surviving bit of foundation called the Western Wall, Jews mourn a horrible past and pray for a better future. The square operates as an open-air synagogue. The faithful believe prayers left in cracks between these ancient stones will be answered. It's a lively scene, with intense yet private worship mixing with the joyous commotion of Jewish families from around the world celebrating bar mitzvahs, a ritual coming of age. The Old City, corralled by its wall into much less than a square mile, is divided into 4 quarters: Jewish, Muslim, Armenian, and Christian. The Christian quarter surrounds the site of Jesus' crucifixion. A high point for visiting Christians is the Via Dolorosa, the route it's believed Jesus walked as he carried the cross. Pilgrims from around Christendom retrace his steps. The 14 Stations of the Cross remind the faithful of the Passion, the events that culminated in the crucifixion. The pilgrim's journey ends in the Church of the Holy Sepulcher on Calvary Hill, or Golgotha. Today, the dark, sprawling church is the most sacred site in Christendom. While Emperor Constantine had the first church built here in the 4th century, most of today's church is the work of 12th century Crusaders. Built around the tomb or sepulcher of Jesus, it's shared by Orthodox, Coptic, and Roman Catholic Christians. Each sect controls a part of this commotion of holy chapels, a reminder of how any religion can be divided into factions. Nearby is the slab upon which it's believed Jesus' dead body was laid. Devotion and emotion have been spilled onto this spot for nearly 2,000 years. A powerful experience to witness, regardless of your faith. A Greek Orthodox chapel marks the site believed to be where Christ was crucified. Only a few steps away, under a grand dome, pilgrims line up to enter the Holy Sepulcher and place a candle near the tomb of Jesus. The Old City is a labyrinth rich with sights, sounds, and experiences that reward the curious traveler.
Hello.
Hello.
Like a pomegranate juice, please.
Even stopping for a drink can be memorable. And the pomegranate, that symbolic bundle of fertility, provides a welcome and refreshing break between the rich sightseeing stops this city offers.
Pomegranate is healthy, it's good for the heart and good for the blood. Hope you enjoy your drink. Cheers.
10 shekels. Thank you, brother.
The Muslim quarter holds over half of the Old City's population. Exploring its busy pedestrian lanes and market stalls, you feel like you could be anywhere in the Arab world. We visited just before a holy day. The shops were jammed, and the energy was exhilarating. Experiences are often edible and tasty.
While complete Muslim control of Jerusalem is unrealistic, many Arabs envision an independent Palestinian state with this part of Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, as their capital. It's a very contentious issue, and Israel seems determined to keep Jerusalem whole and in its control.
In fact, while wandering the heart of the Muslim quarter, you may see houses fortified and festooned with Israeli flags. These are the homes of Jewish families, staking out this bit of the Old City for their community. The Jewish quarter is more orderly and modern than the other quarters. Much of this area was destroyed during the fighting in 1948 or under the ensuing period of Jordanian occupation. After they took control of Jerusalem in 1967, the Israelis rebuilt this quarter. While it's not convenient or economical to live in this medieval tangle, devout Jews find great joy living and raising their families so close to the Western Wall. The Damascus Gate leads from the Old City into modern Jerusalem. Joining locals in an afternoon stroll down Ben Yehuda Street in Jerusalem's new city, we appreciate this culture's fascinating mix of East and West, secular and sacred, modern and traditional. About 3/4 of all Israelis are Jewish, but most of these are secular Jews, non-practicing. About 15% of Israeli Jews are Orthodox, very religious and living conservative lifestyles that require them to be apart in many ways. Entire districts of Jerusalem are known as ultra-Orthodox, and about 20% of the population is Arab Israelis, generally Muslim Palestinians who never left after the formation of Israel. Christians, who are mostly Arabs, make up a very small and shrinking minority. The diversity of Israel's Jewish melting pot community shows itself in the way people dress. This is especially evident at places of worship and in ultra-Orthodox neighborhoods. With the help of a local guide, like A.B. Bresler, simply people-watching comes with fascinating cultural insights.
Walking down the street, there are so many different fashions, different ways people dress.
Well, that's because they express their belonging to a certain group and following a certain rabbi. Different rabbis set standards of how their followers should be dressed.
What does the block on the forehead indicate?
Well, in the scripture it says you should always have the love of God on your mind. So in that capsule, they have a parchment with that scripture.
What's the significance of the yarmulke?
Jews wear yarmulkes because they are constantly reminding themselves that God is above them.
So everybody who's wearing a yarmulke, it's a constant reminder their maker is up above.
Definitely.
Now you see a lot of Orthodox, even the little boys, with long earlocks.
Regarding the earlocks, the Torah is very specific. Thou shalt not shave the sides of your face. And these people take those words as it is written.
You notice women are dressed quite modestly.
The Orthodox women are always dressed modestly, but when they get married, they take it one step upwards and they cover their hair in public.
Now, most people wear black among the men. Why is that?
The dominant color amongst the men is black because they're still mourning the destruction of Jerusalem nearly 2,000 years ago. Regarding the hats, it's part of actually the uniform defining which movement you belong to. So by looking at somebody, you can tell if he's Ashkenazi and which movement amongst the Ashkenazi, or Sephardi, or Lithuanian, and so on and so forth.
This man has a striped robe.
That's a declaration that he belongs to a certain movement, which is considered very extreme and also does not acknowledge the legitimacy of the state of Israel.
So there are many different stripes of orthodoxy in the Jewish faith.
Definitely. In Jerusalem, 19 amongst the ultra-Orthodox.
And it's like the rabbis are almost like pop stars. They have their own following. These are the great teachers.
More than pop stars.
More than
pop stars, sure. Put it this way, they're spiritual stars without the pop.
Israel is laced by modern freeways. By tour bus, public bus, or rental car, getting around is easy. Road signs are in 3 languages and 3 scripts: Hebrew and Arabic for Jews and Arabs, and English for everybody else. And the scenery can be dramatic. Driving along the Dead Sea, the lowest place on earth, you marvel at the timelessness of the landscape and the history it's witnessed. Our destination, Masada, an ancient fortress dramatically capping a mountain and the site of a pivotal event in Jewish history. A gondola zips us effortlessly to the summit. Built over 2,000 years ago as one of King Herod's many palaces, Masada served as a refuge of last resort back when the Jews were the rebellious subjects of Roman occupation.
In about 70 AD, the Roman Emperor Titus, in an effort to put the Jews down once and for all, destroyed Jerusalem. About 1,000 Jewish rebels, in a desperate last stand, fled up to this fortress to defend their families, religion, and way of life.
A mighty army of Romans attacked. You can still see the rocky remains of their camps. To avoid a long starve-'em-out siege, the Roman army engineered and built a massive ramp up the side of this mountain.
Slowly, as the rebels watched with frustration, the ramp was completed. The Jewish rebels realized they were doomed to a life of slavery or worse. So, on the eve of the inevitable Roman breakthrough, Masada's rebels methodically took their own lives.
Today, that mass suicide is the symbol of Israel's staunch, they'll never take us alive commitment to freedom. And Masada shall never fall again is a popular slogan declaring Israel's determination to remain free. While Masada is etched into the psyche of Israelis, perhaps even more so is the Holocaust. The best place to both remember and learn about the Holocaust is Yad Vashem, back in Jerusalem. This sprawling and beautifully landscaped memorial and museum is dedicated to chronicling, remembering, and learning from the slaughter of 6 million Jews by Nazi Germany. School groups, visiting heads of state, and soldiers are all brought here to appreciate what the Holocaust means to the Jewish people. The museum artfully tells the story. While working their way through the thoughtfully laid out exhibit, visitors struggle to comprehend the madness and the scope of that nightmare. The Hall of Names is designed to give every Jewish victim the dignity of simply being named and recorded. This archive aspires to catalog and therefore remember each of the 6 million victims. Yad Vashem also celebrates the creation of modern Israel. It shows the spirit of Zionism, that determination of those who came both as concentration camp survivors and refugees from Europe to forge a state for the Jewish people. Photos of the first settlers show early Zionists returning to their historic homeland, starting as a trickle in the late 19th century and becoming a flood after the Holocaust. Today, just a few generations later, the skyscrapers of Tel Aviv are like exclamation points declaring, "We've come a long way."
There was a popular slogan back then, "A land without a people for a people without a land." That was inspirational, but it ignored the reality of the Palestinians who actually lived here and were displaced with the creation of Israel. Still, it's impressive how the true grit of those early Jewish settlers turned sand dunes into Tel Aviv and built modern Israel.
Tel Aviv is a young city. If looking for historic charm, you can stroll the original main drag, Rothschild Boulevard, with its nostalgic cafes and venerable buildings. But Tel Aviv is gleamingly modern and growing fast. Its infrastructure is impressive, and its new buildings look to the future. Its beach scene comes with some of the best sand on the Mediterranean. A world away from the religiosity of Jerusalem, the people here seem focused on living for today. In this culture, food is love, and it seems to celebrate the bounty of the land. We sat down with our guide Benny and driver Kobe to get an edible lesson in this part of Jewish culture.
Hey, cheers. L'chaim.
L'chaim, very good. So Benny, could you say this is typical Israeli?
Yeah, you can say this is typical Israeli. Everything that you see here is grown here locally.
No, you could say this is Israeli, but it's also Arab cuisine.
Yes.
Everywhere.
We call it now Israeli food, but you can find it in the Arab countries, you can find it in Lebanon, you can find it all over the Middle East. Here we have eggplants with olive oil and tahini. Here we have the tahini itself. Here we have another eggplant salad with vegetables. That's the hummus, very famous hummus made from chickpeas. This is something special. This we call tabbouleh. It's made of burghul and parsley and cucumbers. Very special, very tasty. It's okay to reach and dip your pita bread into it. You dip it in each of the salads, and that's the way to do it. No need of a fork or a knife.
And Kobe, how do you say bon appetit in Hebrew?
Bete avon.
Bete
avon.
Bete avon.
Avon.
Thank you.
L'chaim.
L'chaim.
A short drive up Israel's coastline and then into the interior takes us down, 700 feet below sea level, to the Sea of Galilee. Israel's primary source of fresh water, it's both fed and drained by the Jordan River. This area has long been popular with Israeli vacationers and Christian pilgrims. Galilee is famous as the place where Jesus did his 3 years of ministry and where so many Bible stories were set. In the Jordan River, the faithful believe John the Baptist baptized Jesus. And today, Christians from all over the world come here in droves to affirm their baptism with a dip into that same fabled river. This busy north end of Galilee is where the Bible says Jesus walked on water, calmed the storm, and talked fishermen into changing careers.
In the Bible, Matthew wrote, as Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Peter and Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake as they were fishermen. And Jesus said, "Come follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men."
The faithful come here to worship, be inspired, and walk in the footsteps of Jesus. In this church, a rock marks Mensah, Christie, the place where it's believed Christ, resurrected after his crucifixion, ate with his disciples and said specifically to Peter, "Feed my sheep." For Roman Catholics, this is a very important site, as it established the importance of Peter, the first pope, among the disciples. Another church is built upon the place where, according to the Bible, the 5,000 who gathered to hear Jesus preach were miraculously fed by a few fish and loaves of bread. This mosaic is from the original church that stood here in the 5th century. And this church, perched high above the Galilee on Mount Beatitude, marks the place where Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount. Beatitude is Latin for blessing. The faithful come from far and wide to remember how Jesus said, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. And blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy." This group from Nigeria is one more spirited example of how so much of our world embraces this land as truly holy. Having sampled the great sights and experiences of Israel, visitors, whether religious or not, leave impressed by the amazing diversity of the sightseeing packed into this small country. And it's hard not to be impressed by the richness and complexity of the cultures and traditions that have steeped for so many centuries here in the Holy Land.
In this land, so treasured by Jews, Muslims, and Christians, I'm reminded that the prophets of each of these religions taught us to love our neighbors. And the lessons learned from traveling here in Israel can inspire us all to strive for that ideal. I'm Rick Steves. Until next time, keep on traveling. Shalom.
Hope you enjoyed that. It's a lot of information. I wanted you to hear the sounds and some sights that I can't provide in just a photograph. So anyway, we're gonna move along. We're gonna haba, as Michael told us a lot, which means let's get going. Moving people, we're gonna move on. So we're gonna start with this picture, and we're gonna begin at Tel Megiddo, which is in northern Israel. It's a key city during the Canaanite and Israeli periods. And a Tel, if you don't know, is a man-made town built over a previous civilization. And Tel Megiddo has 22 civilizations. So you will note the little cutout here that the archaeologists use to kind of examine all the different civilizations and learn about the people. And the round slab you see there, about midway, is the oldest known location of human sacrifices. Quite eerie. In Hebrew, Megiddo is known as Armageddon, or by a more familiar name, Armageddon. And you can read more about Megiddo in Revelation 16, verses 14 through 19. And now we're standing on the Mount of Precipice in the Jezreel Valley, which I mentioned earlier, and that's Mount Tabor in the distance. and Nazareth at the base. When Jesus began teaching with authority in the synagogue, the leaders of the law, as you know, they didn't appreciate that very much. So they conspired to take him to this place, and they were going to propel him to his death. But as we know, as Derek has said in class before, somehow Jesus manages to escape. And it is said that he never ever returned to Nazareth again after that. Now we're inside the Greek Basilica of the Annunciation, and it's one of 18 churches of the Annunciation in Nazareth. 18. This beautiful church is very ornate. It was built in the 3rd or the 4th century at the site of a spring, which served as the local watering hole for nearly 3,000 years. It's believed that Mary first heard Angel Gabriel's voice as she was drawing water in the spring. Below ground is a 1st century excavated homes where pottery and coins have been found, as well as a 1st century synagogue. So we're looking at what is called an icon station. It's kind of folded out like a book. And we were there right after Easter, and one side represents Easter, and the other side represents the disciples. And we sat on wooden benches kind of behind. You can't see the benches where we were, but before we went in, Michael said, "Gentlemen, take off your caps and your hats, and ladies, be sure you don't cross your legs, because that's considered to be offensive to our Lord." One thing I noticed is that the streets seem narrow, because, as we were told, they're originally designed for animals and not tour buses. And I noticed trash everywhere, which was kind of disheartening. Okay, these next few photos were in Tabgha in Galilee, and I have 2 photos from the Mount of Beatitudes. I think this was in the video as well. It's a double-tiered monastery that was believed to have been constructed by the Italians in 1936 above remains of earlier churches, signifying that many people honored the location where it's believed Jesus delivered his famous Sermon on the Mount. The floor is designed octagonal, representing the 8 Beatitudes. Vibrant red and pink flowering bushes and massive palm trees lined the walk paths. And along the way, there were stone markers, about this big, each captioned with the Beatitude. And you can find the most popular version of this sermon in Matthew 5, verses 3 through 12. The next photo is the exterior view of the Primacy of St. Peter Church in Galilee, and I believe we saw a shot of that also. And next is a photo of the bronze sculpture where Jesus recognizes Peter as chief among the apostles and asks him to feed my sheep. Next, inside the chapel, is the Mensah Christie Bedrock, which in Latin means table of Christ, where Jesus cooked breakfast for the disciples over a charcoal fire. At least that's the story. Nearby is the narrow interior chapel of the Benedictine Church of the Multiplication of the Loaves and the Fish, the accepted location where the miracle of the multiplication took place. I think there might have been a picture of that in the video as well. The next photo is of a fishing boat on the Sea of Galilee, and that's right next to the Primacy building that we saw earlier. And Josephus, I think Derek's mentioned Josephus a few times, he once recorded that there are several kinds of fish in the Sea of Galilee, different both to the taste and sight from those elsewhere: carp, sardine, mullet, catfish, and St. Peter's fish, which is the best known in the lake. And our lunch that day consisted of St. Peter's fish, French fries. We always got French fries. I don't know why. I guess they thought we Americans eat French fries all the time. And the hummus and vegetables. To be adventurous, I asked that my fish be presented with its eyes, but others chose differently. I think I have a picture down here somewhere, and the eyes are kind of in the corner of the frame. But I thought, I'm just going to be a little adventuresome here. I didn't eat the eyes. The 13-year-old grandson of our leader was offered money if he would eat the eyes, and he ate the eyes. I would like to have known how much he got for that. Nearby, we stopped at the Ancient Boat Museum. This is an interesting story. This is called the Jesus Boat. It's a 2,000-year-old boat made with cedar and oak, and it was discovered in 1986 by two fisherman brothers as they came upon dried brush by the water. When the archaeologists attempted to bring it out of the water, it began to crumble, and that was disturbing. So, not wanting to destroy it, they stopped what they were doing and developed a plan to see how they could get it out of the water safely. And they decided to pack it in styrofoam. So this may not have been the boat that Jesus was in, but it's a boat from the time period, which is certainly interesting. This particular morning was somewhat foggy when we were on the sea, and actually the Sea of Galilee was created by earthquakes. I don't think he mentioned that in the video. For about 45 minutes, we sang praise songs and strolled along in the boat. Ancient people named this lake Kinneret, which means lyre, L-Y-R-E, because its shape reminded them of the musical instrument that King David played the lyre. Our God Michael told us that Galilee was his vitamins, that each day we must invest in one person a day to plant seeds to get the best harvest. And we should ask ourselves, what is my soul today? What did I do wrong today? And be the house of God. Build the best vessel of me. And he would say, be Galilee, be the house of God, and be home to someone. He had written a book when we were there, and he was in the process of writing another book, but for the life of me, I cannot find it anywhere. I've Googled and tried to find it, and I can't find it. So if I do find it, I'll let you know. Okay, these next few are bordering Galilee and Golan on the northwest corner of the sea, and this is in Capernaum, which was, as you know, the center of Jesus' ministry. And these photos here are of the ruins. This picture is of the modern octagonal building built above Peter's mother-in-law's house. And inside there's glass flooring to allow for easy view. And you can see the ruins in this next photo here. And then the third photo is of the excavated city, which to me seemed to spread for miles in all directions. It was a huge place. A short walk away is the impressive White Synagogue, which is a late 4th century synagogue constructed over a 1st century synagogue, believed to have been once Peter's home. Luke 4:31 and 32 states, then Jesus went to Capernaum, a town in Galilee, and taught there in the synagogue every Sabbath day. Mark 1:21 through 28 tells us that Jesus cast out demons plaguing a man in the town. And in Mark 2, verses 1 through 4, Jesus healed Peter's mother-in-law of a fever. Capernaum is also where the determined friends cut the hole in the roof and lowered their paralytic friend. The Franciscans have owned this property since the late 19th century and continue to oversee the excavations. Now we're 8 miles north of Tiberias at the northwestern shore of the Sea of Galilee in Magdala, known as Migdal in Hebrew. And Magdala was a very busy fishing village and is a traditional home of Mary Magdalene according to 6th century common area text. So anytime if you see, we're used to BC and AD, but if you see CE, it means common area, or CE common, the common era, common time AD. And this first picture is of Omar. He's the lead guide, and he was telling us about this discovery in 2009 when they were working on a foundation for a new guest house in Magdala. Workers unearthed the ruins of a 1st century synagogue, and within the synagogue was this rectangular shaped stone, which is called the Magdala Stone. And it's the oldest, it has on it the oldest representation of a menorah that has been found to this point. It is celebrated as the most significant archaeological discovery in the past 50 years. While this particular stone is a replica, the original is somewhere in Jerusalem for safekeeping. Ancient coins were discovered here as well, and it's quite certain that Jesus would have taught in this synagogue. You can read about a rare second synagogue recently discovered in Magdala on page 10 in your booklet. And that happened in December of 2021, so that's a very recent find. So you could read all about that in the book. Still in Magdala, in the second photo, we are inside the Duke and Altum, which in Latin means put out into the deep. This contemporary church was built to honor the women who assisted in the ministry of Jesus and his disciples. Mary Magdalene's family was believed to have been quite wealthy. The altar and the ceiling are fashioned to resemble a boat, and the Sea of Galilee is seen just beyond the altar. And in this next picture, we're in the lower level, known as the Encounter Chapel. And the stone that you see in the lower part of the picture is a portion of the stone path from a first century marketplace. Beyond that, the large wall mosaic is a beautiful representation of the account in Matthew 9, verse 20, of the bleeding woman who knew that if she could just touch the hem of Jesus' robe, she would be healed. And it's just an amazing piece of artwork. This next photo is our view from the Sea of Galilee from our room in the Leonardo Hotel in Tiberias. The hotel you see on the right is another Leonardo hotel, and I kind of call them the Holiday Inns of Israel. From Tiberias, we traveled north to Caesarea Philippi in the Golan Heights, and this first picture is of several photos from this region of the Jordan River, a valuable source for irrigation. The Jordan is formed from the snow caps of Mount Hermon in Syria and ends at the Dead Sea. This next photo is of the rock ruins and entrance to the Gate of Hades, which was a place of pagan worship where human sacrifices were performed, and they did this to honor Zeus and Pan. In these next two pictures, Vicki and I are standing next to the pillars, and you can see the detail of the scroll work. It's here that Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do the people say I am? And who do you say I am?" Next is a picture of a village street in a Druze community, Druze, D-R-U-Z-E, as we traveled to our next destination. They are faithful Arabic-speaking citizens who also serve in the Israeli Defense Forces. Although their faith originated from Ismaili Islam, they do not identify as Muslims and practice their own religion. And the last photo speaks for itself. Everyone has laundry to do. Still in the Golan Heights, we traveled to the excavations of Masada, east of the Jordan River, where Peter, Andrew, and Philip were born, and then Peter later settled in Capernaum. At one time, the Sea of Galilee stretched this far north, but due to irrigation, the water level has dropped. Pastor Steve brought back some broken pieces of clay and passed them around in one of the services after our visit from this area. I wasn't sure what you could actually take, so I didn't have too many artifacts to bring. I have a few shells from the sea that I took, but anyway, he brought back some of those and passed those around. And when we were there in April, we had been told that the excavations would resume in July, which would be very warm. And when they do that, they put up tenting. They're usually blue-covered tenting to protect them from all the heat and the sun. Okay, on Saturday, day 4, the plan was to travel south to Jerusalem, known as the City of Joy. Banana and palm farms were abundant on both sides of the road. Michael told us that each banana plant produces fruit every 4 months. Interestingly, in the middle of the desert, we passed a gas station and just one lone random donkey. Of interest, however, was the mountain range that Michael brought to our attention, the very mountains where events described in 1 Samuel 31 occurred. The account where King Saul, mortally wounded by the Philistines who refused to be captured, committed suicide falling on his sword when his armor bearer refused to do that. Today, there's a large wind farm on this mountain, so they're becoming very modernized. From here, we passed through a checkpoint and continued on our way, observing huge mountains of stone and amazing earthquake-riddled topography. Then we approached the tunnel that leads up into the city of joy, Jerusalem. Michael told us that one always goes up when entering Jerusalem. In the second picture, I was impressed by the expanse of the stone buildings that just stretch for miles, even upward into the mountains. We have gray houses, we have blue houses, we have yellow houses. They have stone everywhere. It's all one color. Continuing in Bethlehem, the next two pictures are from our visit to the Church of the Nativity. This Greek Orthodox basilica is the oldest church in Israel and the only church to have been spared destruction. We were told that there is some agreement between the nations that that church can never be destroyed. Constantine, the Roman emperor, and he was a devout Christian as well, commissioned his mother, Helena, to supervise construction of this church as well as many others throughout Israel. This church was constructed above the birthplace where Jesus was born in a natural cave called the Grotto, Grotto, Grotto. Due to the church's hourly services, we waited in line 2 grueling hours before we descended 15 steps into the grotto. Okay, yeah, there's the grotto. As one would expect, guards were posted in the area, and unfortunately, because another service was about to begin, we kind of had to move along rather quickly. So now we're back in Jerusalem. The next two photos are from our visit to the Western Wall, which is the most holy site for the Jews. It's sometimes identified as the Wailing Wall, but we learned that the Jews really don't like that term. They're kind of offended by it. All who visit must enter through a separate entrance. Men enter on one side and women through the other, separated by a partition when you get into the plaza area. And then next picture may be a picture of, what's the next one there, Caleb? Nope. Can you go back to? Yeah, notice the deck chairs. I thought that was really, okay. I didn't expect to see deck chairs there. Vicki and I did place our prayers in the cracks of the wall. We were told ahead of time to prepare something that we would be allowed to do that. And then no one told us this, but I had observed that as the women were close to the wall, when they were ready to leave the area, they walked backwards, so never putting their back on the wall. And so I found myself just sort of doing this because I didn't want to turn my back to the wall either, and that's a Jewish custom. Later we learned that these prayers, that they gather those and they store them beneath the wall, and I believe they're prayed over them. Michael explained that the Orthodox Jews believe it's their job to pray for themselves and others. And at home, before they come, they do a ritual big purification wash in their home. And then when they come to the plaza, Caleb, if you could do the next one, I think that might be the fountain. They'll do a smaller ritual wash there. Looks like something you could buy at Lowe's. In your booklet, I also put a website where you can actually go to this website and see live coverage from the wall, which is kind of interesting. The next two pictures are where Jesus was known to teach. This is called the teaching steps. And the next photo is just an awesome view of Jerusalem from those steps. Around the corner from the teaching steps is the location where temple sacrifices could be purchased, and there's Vicki in that picture. The shaded rocks in the next picture, in the upper right corner, those large rocks, they came crashing down during an earthquake, and they've just left them there, still there today. The next picture is the Jewish cemetery at the Mount of Olives, and we learned it's really quite expensive to be buried there. And when a person passes away, their remains are kept in a tomb for a period of time, for about a year, and then the family will go and they'll gather the bones and they'll place them in a box called an ossuary, and then they take them to a cemetery. So I don't know if people reserve their spot. We did come across another cemetery in another place. So I'm not sure how they do that. And actually in that second cemetery, I saw sandbags just kind of thrown around. And I asked our leader's wife, I said, what's with the sandbags? And she told me that the Jews believed, from dust we came and from dust we shall return. For a small extra fee, our tour company offered the opportunity to share a meal at the home of a Palestinian family. And 4 of us from our group rode the bus through the checkpoint again and met Suzanne in an empty parking lot. And Suzanne is on the right. And she drove her little small efficient car and zipped us really quickly through the streets back to her upstairs apartment. And when we noted, as we came in the door, we went up the steps, and as we came in the door, it was just one big room with a kitchen on the far side, just a sink along a wall, and then another wall had a TV area, and our 2 boys were watching Israeli cartoons. And then a little bit of a living area with smaller sized couches and love seats. And then right as we walked in the door immediately was our dinner table. And this living area probably was no bigger than Fellowship Hall. There were 2 bedrooms and a bath. And interestingly, I didn't go into the bath, but just down the hallway was the lavatory, the sink. It wasn't even in what we would call a bathroom. It was in the hallway. So Suzanne is on the right. She is Christian and works in her church library, and she's mom to 2 boys, and I just found out recently she's had a little baby girl. She's married to a police officer, and when we were there, he was in Egypt. Either he was studying to be a police officer or getting more training, so we did not meet him, and he was going to be gone for a period of 6 months. Her sister Ronine is on the left, and she is an attorney, and interestingly, she told us that she attended lawyer school for 2 years and then took a big exam. And our meal was baked chicken and maftol, M-A-F-T-O-L, which is, I would say, similar to like risotto. And our beverages choices were Coca-Cola, an orange beverage, or a tomato juice type mixture that is in a glass jar. And when Susan was asked about that, she explained the red drink is similar to vodka. No one selected the vodka. And then for dessert, we sat on the couches, and she served us Easter cookies, since it was just right after Easter, which is like a butter cookie, and herbal tea. They can trace their family back 700 years. In the next picture, we're at the Mount of Olives, and this first one is from the Garden of Gethsemane, which is very protected with fencing, and Michael told us there are 400 cameras in this area, 400. And the second picture shows a 2,000-year-old olive tree. Olive trees are very hardy, and they regenerate new shoots from their base that are not amenable to disease. Because of this, the caretakers are not concerned that it will die, although Josephus reported that the Romans cut down all of the olive trees in Jerusalem while making their equipment. Scientists from the University of California performed radiocarbon dating tests in 1982 that revealed the age of various tree samples to be 2,300 years old. I learned that olives from these trees are pressed and used for oil in Gethsemane's sanctuary lamps, and the pits are used to make rosary beads. not rosemary beads, rosary beads. And the last picture is of the Church of All Nations at Gethsemane. And this basilica was given its name because many countries contributed to its construction in 1924, the third church to be constructed here. It's often referred to as the Church of the Agony and is the location where Jesus prayed on the night of his betrayal. The next few photos were in Jericho, which is known as the City of Palms, considered to be the oldest city in the world, approximately 10,000 years old. We enjoyed an outdoor lunch here, and I have pictures of local shops, and note the water toys for the Dead Sea nearby. And the next picture is of a sycamore tree, maybe not the one that Zacchaeus climbed, however, it is in a protected park. Interestingly, in the 19th century, the Russians, fascinated with this parable, purchased land next to the tree and constructed a museum and park complex. And apparently, Putin has visited this area. Because King Herod had a winter residence here, Michael told an interesting story that when King Herod died, his slaves were instructed to murder the male population in the area. And by doing this, the participants in his funeral procession to Herodium, which is at Bethlehem, would believe that the women of Jericho were mourning Herod's death, when in fact they were mourning the death of their sons, their spouses, their family members. So he was a pretty vain guy, but he was very paranoid too. And in this next photo, this is Cave 4 at Qumran, which is known as Ahava, the city of the Dead Sea. The Essene community inhabited much of this area and were known to hide scripture in these caves. And your booklet also has a detailed account of the Bedouin shepherd boy who stumbled across this cave when he was searching for a lost sheep. He tossed some stones down into the cave, hoping to hear the sheep bleat, but instead, he knew he struck something that wasn't a sheep, and upon looking, there were clay jars there that contained ancient scrolls. These are, of course, known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. Handwritten on parchment and papyrus in the most ancient form of Hebrew, the scrolls had been tucked away in jars for protection. But thanks to dry climate, thousands of scrolls have been discovered in total. They are the oldest, most well-preserved copies of the Old Testament. The entire book of Isaiah was discovered, and most of the book of Esther. Even though the caves have been pillaged over the centuries in search of artifacts to sell, I recently read an article that archaeologists believe that there are secret passages yet to be uncovered that may contain additional scrolls. Back in Jerusalem, I have two photos of the small dungeon prison in the house of Caiaphas, the high priest who organized the plot to have Jesus killed. The Church of St. Peter in Gallicantu is a multi-level Roman Catholic church constructed on this site. In Latin, Gallicantu means cock's crow. And at the top of the first photo, you will note the appearance of that white circle. That's actually a hole in the ceiling. We use modern steps to descend. You can see one of our fellow pilgrims walking down the steps. But Jesus would have been tied with a rope and lowered down into that dungeon to await his crucifixion. And then there's some stairs. Next, we're at the stone bridge near St. Anne Catholic Church that overlooks the ruins of the Pool of Bethesda and a Byzantine church. I think I might have pulled out this picture in one of our Bible studies. In John 5, verses 1 through 9, we read about the man lame for 38 years, seated on his mat, waiting for his opportunity to enter the healing water when Jesus notices him and has compassion for him and instructed the man to pick up his mat and walk. These ruins and Byzantine church are located in the Muslim quarter of the Old City. We toured Bible Land's museum and model city in Jerusalem, and archaeologists have discovered items from nearly every period of Jerusalem's history in the citadel courtyard. Based on archaeological evidence, Model City is 1/5 scale topography of the Old City, Jerusalem during the Second Temple period prior to its destruction by the Romans in 70 CE, Common Era. Michael explained that wealthier citizens during that time had homes with terracotta roofing. I don't know if you can see it in this picture, but every once in a while you'll see the terracotta roofing. Adjacent to Model City is the Shrine of the Book. This museum houses only about 10% of the recovered Dead Sea Scrolls. 90% of the scrolls have been hidden somewhere in Israel for safety. I have two pictures, and this one is a view from a rooftop, nearby rooftop, where you can see the top is constructed to represent the lid of a clay jar, and you could probably pick out the little streams of water. They have that going 24/7 to keep it cool for document safety. And this next photo is from inside the building, where you can see the top of the picture is the lid of the jar. And the scrolls were displayed in glass cases with protective glass. The next four pictures are from our time at Golgotha. The first picture is Golgotha, the place of the skull, location of Jesus' crucifixion, and I think you can sort of make out the eyes. Our guide, Michael, told us that about 30 years ago, they kind of ruined the lower half of the skull in order to make room for bus parking. Kind of sad. This next picture is Garden Tomb. And after Jesus' death, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a wealthy man and member of the Sanhedrin, he believed that Jesus was the Messiah and asked to be given Jesus' body for burial in his personal tomb. And you may remember that I said the body is kept in a tomb for a year, and then the bones are retrieved by the family. I imagine that Joseph thought he wasn't going to need his tomb for a year. So, okay, Jesus, we'll put you in my tomb. I don't think I'm going to need it for a year. And the third picture, let's see, we're entering the tomb in this picture. And the next picture is the slab where they believe that Jesus, that's from inside the Garden Tomb. There's a little bit of a controversy on where the exact location is of his death, burial. Is it here or is it in the Church of the Holy Sepulcher? They're still kind of trying to work those things out. We were in both areas. Does it matter? No. On the outside, it said, what did it say? It said, he is no longer here. He's no longer here. And then from here, we walked to a nearby building and celebrated communion. And Michael told us that Catholics will walk the 14 stations of the cross every Friday at 3 o'clock. So if you want to go over there, make it a point to be there on a Friday, and you can participate in that. And I have a few remaining pictures. They're just simply scenes of interest, and this one's just a street corner in Jerusalem. It had an automated traffic light. It was the only one we ever saw, so we can assume that there aren't too many. Didn't really see stop signs or anything like that either. A lot of roundabouts, and people just kind of did their own thing. The second picture was a payphone in the middle of the desert. We took a restroom break, and behind us is just Stone Mountain. But here you can see lush bushes and trees and a payphone. And she happened to be walking by, and I said, oh, stop, let me get your picture. It's always nice to have somebody in the picture. So, let's see, the next one's a narrow street in one of the quarters of the old city, complete with a little bit of graffiti. Michael told us that there is some crime, but the old city virtually closes down at 8 p.m., so it's not too bad. And there's another one. And then the next one I thought was interesting. We're walking by, and these two workmen, they're just on a break, so I took their picture. And the next one's just out the bus window. just taking a picture of women and what they wear, just some of the culture. And there we are at the Jerusalem Mall. It's actually evening there. And beautiful lighting. And we did find a few things. And then the next one, I was going to tell you that we went inside the mall as well. And I think Steve was a little uncomfortable shopping with two ladies, so he found a place to sit and let Vicki and I do our own thing. These are just some conglomeration pictures. I thought, Pizza Hut, McDonald's, there's Pepsi and Coke, and I actually did see a sign for Ohio State. Ohio State? I bet you didn't know that there are 50 franchises of McDonald's throughout Israel. Isn't that something? This last picture is just of Butch Malone. He's from southern Indiana, and he had his camcorder going out the bus window everywhere he was. He had his camcorder attached to his shoulder the whole time, and bless this man's heart, he put together a DVD, and I have it on the table, and he actually composed the music that's in the DVD, and it was just awesome. I saw myself a few times in the same shirt and the same old hat. Didn't change a whole lot. And that's pretty much my presentation. There's a lot to cover. I wanted the video to give you an idea of some things that I can't tell you through pictures, but that's pretty much it. So I will just say shalom. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them the best I can. Thank you. How many days? It was 10 days total because we had to count for travel there and back, but the tour actually was 7 days. And we heard later that they combined 2 tours from the tour company, which is EO, and I have got some information down here. Educational Opportunities, they're out of Lakeland, Florida. They were just wonderful to work with. They would send an email, okay, you're 12 months away from your trip, be looking over your study guides, and they would have little Bible studies that they would send to us, and then, okay, you're 9 months away, and you might want to do this, and remind us of our little payments, every now and then. Oh, you're 3 weeks away, I bet you're getting excited, and doing this and that. So they were awesome, and it was a very affordable trip. It included our airfare. It included our 3 hotels, which were wonderful. It included breakfast and our evening meal, plentiful buffets. The only thing I would say is when we were in Tiberias, the buffet was just like an open cafeteria, and you just kind of went from one side to the other, and then they had a dessert table. And the first place, you got your little tray, and you kind of get in line, and there are these huge baskets with all shapes of breads, rolls, that kind of thing. And there were some, I think they were Ethiopian women. A lot of Ethiopians were there because it was the Holocaust remembrance at that time. So Jerusalem was really busy with people. And waiting in line, and one of them picks up a roll, and she talks to her friend, and she's showing it to her. She puts it back, and she picks up another one, and they look that over, and she puts that back, and I skipped the bread that night. So it was a really full tour. About 4:30 or 5 o'clock as we're heading back to our hotel, I'm thinking, oh, good, I'm getting tired. And people would sleep on the bus. I'm like, how could you sleep on your bus? You're missing all this scenery. I'm snapping pictures out the window. You probably noticed some glare a few times. And I would look at my pictures and think, oh, it's not really showing the layers of rock like I see. And so I just kind of had to get rid of some of those because you can't appreciate it. When you have it in your mind, you see it, but your camera doesn't capture it right. But yeah, it was wonderful, and I think every time I talk about it with Derek, he says, I got to get there one day, I got to get there one day. Yeah. Yeah, we could take our time. We found a couple of large rocks. Vicki and I sat on a large rock, and Steve did as well. And we took off our shoes and socks and just kind of waded around. It's kind of surreal. There's so much to take in. They kept us moving because we had a lot of places to see. And Michael, he knew exactly what time of day to visit certain places to keep the crowd down. But we kept moving. The longest we were anywhere was the Church of the Holy Sepulcher, which is the big ornate church. It doesn't look like it's anything special on the outside, but it's hugely ornate, a lot of gold, just incredible. We were there, we were allowed 45 minutes there, but by the time we stood in line to go into the holy area itself, we had 15 minutes left, and we felt like we moved maybe 5 feet. And we knew we weren't going to get in there, so we just kind of stepped out, and we found organ pipes, and Vicki took my picture under the organ pipes. Didn't know where the organ was, but okay, I got to have my picture with the organ pipes, so they're in my box somewhere. We did visit the upstairs restroom, which is the picture over here. The hotel restrooms were modern, nothing weird when you're there. When you get out in Israel itself, you see how everybody else lives, and it kind of takes you back a little bit, because especially the one in the Golan Heights was like, okay, do I want to do this or not? Anything else? There are some bookmarks and postcards here. Help yourself. They're not actually from Israel. I couldn't find the ones that I brought back 4 years ago, but you're welcome to those. There's also some little pieces of paper that talk about Magdala, if you want to get online and follow. This priest, Eamon Kelly's been here in Magdala, I think, about 20 years. And he's just the nicest man, and he does a daily stroll and chat, and he walks along the water with his little phone contraption. He has something that makes it smooth so that when he walks, it's very smooth and you're not looking like this. So he's awesome. There's information there if you want to learn to follow him. They're getting ready to start a Lenten devotional. Kathleen Nichols is the one who does that, and they're stationed in Duke and Altum. It's a beautiful church, and there is a visitor center. It was still being constructed when we were there. It's mostly completed now, and they love to have visitors. So if you want to learn how to get on that, I think I've got some papers down here somewhere. Feel free to just pick up the books and look around.